going up into college. So this will be their last activity as part of our Echo Youth Group. They do not have to bring money for lunch. The church will cover that. And the Zale Island things for the rest of the kids. But if you didn't graduate this last spring, you got to bring your own lunch money, okay? If you have any questions, ask Pastor Caleb about that, right? All right. All right. His official first week is this week, so he'll start being in the office this week. So if you have any deep counseling needs and probing questions, you just go ahead and we'll defer you to the pastor of youth, all right? That's what we'll do. I want to make sure you all get this because this one's really exciting to me. The deacons and I, as we sit around and talk, we just appreciate so much everybody who puts work into this church. And we were trying to figure out, how can we show our volunteers that we appreciate them? This is what we're going to do. I want you to write this down. We'll keep announcing it. On September 22nd, which is a Friday, we are going to invite all of you who volunteer in any capacity in our church to, we're calling it a servant appreciation dinner. Okay, this is how it works. If you serve at all in our church, there will be a sign-up sheet starting after this service in the back, just to sign up on how many in your family are coming, okay? So we know how to plan for it. We're going to give you 3 weeks. We'd like to have the final total by September 3rd so we can make all the preparations. We'll do it here at the church. We'll give you a meal, and we'll just do some fun stuff. So write that down. Friday, September 22nd, 6:30 p.m., all of you who volunteer in church, but please sign up so we know how many are going to come. This is not something we're asking. A couple other people are going to come on and help, but Vicky's not handling this. Vicky's a servant. Vicky gets served at this one. That's how this works, right? And all you who come out and work in the funeral dinners and things, this is for you. So just sign up and then come out that night. We just want to show you that we appreciate everything that happens, all the volunteers that happen in this church that make things happen. Also, September 3rd, I told you we had a few, is Labor Day Cookout Sunday. Is that 2 weeks, 3 weeks from today? I don't know. It's almost Christmas as far as I know. 2 weeks? Wow. And we'll have our Labor Day Cookout after the morning service, so bring enough food for your family and some others. We'll, of course, have the grill going out back, some hot dogs and hamburgers, brats. I don't know what all Gary will throw on that thing. But we'll look forward to that the Sunday right before Labor Day. All right, we're going to ask our ushers to come forward now, if you will, please. We'll take up our offering that helps us to keep things going around here. As they're coming, I have to remind you, Awana is just about to start up, our kids program for the year. The fun fair will be August 27th. That's 2 weeks from today. I don't know, you got to look at the calendar. August 27th. Will be our fun fair in the evening service. That Friday before that, which would equal to about the 25th, if you can come out and help on that Friday night at 6 o'clock, we can use help setting up in the gym, getting everything ready. Even if you're not an Awana worker, come on out, and this is a way to support the focus of our kids in this church as we're getting ready for this year. So let's have a big Awana year. Come out that Friday night to help set up. We need candy. I feel like we're always asking for candy. The Easter egg hunt, Bible school, Awana. This is how it works. If you're a part of East Lake Baptist Church, every time you go to the store, buy candy and bring it to the church all year. That's how we do things around here. But we would like to keep the dentists in business in the area, and so we like to give the kids candy. But if you can bring some in and set it here in the foyer, that will be helpful for the Awana Fun Fair. All right, you got all the announcements. I think that's good for today. Let's ask the blessing on the offering, please.
Dear God, we're just rejoicing. For this day is the day you have made. Let us be glad and rejoice in it. This place, this sanctuary, is where your word is spoken. The light in a dark world. Dear God, let that light shine. Let each one of us become more and more the image of Jesus Christ. Bless the pastor as he gives the word. Bless the offering that we take. We ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. And great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, we pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, we pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. You stand with us as we sing. All the earth will shout your praise, and our hearts will cry. And all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry. These bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. And all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry. These bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. And all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry. These bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, we pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, we pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. And great are you, Lord. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. When I feel afraid and I think I've lost my way, still there right beside me. Nothing will I fear as long as you are near. Please be near me to the end. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. I will not forget your love for me, and yet my heart forever is wandering. Jesus, be my guide and hold me to your side. I will love you to the end. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my unto my path. You're the light unto my path.
All right, let's pray this morning. Father, we're grateful that you give us this place to meet in. We're grateful for the air conditioning we have and the heat in the winter. We're grateful for the people who make up this church and who come out and volunteer and serve and pray and do all the things that they do to make things happen. And we ask that we would be able to be a good testimony to our area. And today we have some folks that may have come in here with burdens on them, things that they're carrying that are just bothering them, and they can't figure out why you would allow these things to happen in their lives. And I ask that today they maybe would get a little bit of an answer for that, and that this would be encouraging to them. Help us to glorify you in what we do and to learn. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, be seated if you will. Blast can go ahead and head out. Third grade on down. Head out and have a blast. We will be having promotion here pretty soon, the week after Labor Day. All of the kids that are coming out of third grade into the fourth, they get to graduate from Blast to here. What a privilege. What a blessing, right? They might like to be there for a couple more years, but they get to come out here. So that'll be in a few weeks here. All right, the book of Genesis, the book of beginnings. The word Genesis means beginning. We're going to go there today. For the next 3 weeks, we're going to talk about Joseph. I don't know a much better guy that we could talk about than Joseph. There's so much stuff about his life, but I'm going to pick out 3 things I think will really help us in our lives as we look at the story of Joseph. So a few weeks ago, my wife and I were sitting in McDonald's. There's a shocker. We were sitting in McDonald's. We were off on a trip, and we just could take some downtime, sit there, and I had my iPod, and I was going to, do some work, and she was going to look for coupons or whatever it is she does. And we're just going to sit there for a while, and this family comes and he sits down just at the booth right behind her, right? So I'm looking at them. And they had a little girl there that was in a high chair and a little boy, and we started understanding that they were speaking a different language, and I think it was either Russian or Ukrainian. I could pick out a few words there, and I knew it was something like that, but, just trying not to eavesdrop, but trying to see, if we could pick any of the, eavesdropping, I guess is the term for it. But they were there, and everything seemed to be going well, and suddenly I heard a commotion, and I looked up just on time to see the whole tray that she had hit the floor. Let the screaming commence. You've been there, right? You know what it's like. The screaming, it was horrendous. This little girl, she screamed and she carried on and she was going crazy. And it sounds, one of the reasons I think they were speaking in Russian is because she kept saying, "Nyet, nyet, nyet," it means no. And she was just going crazy. And we're sitting there like, oh, I'm glad our kids aren't little anymore. It is so nice. I mean, some of the old, Austin and Caleb, they still do it a little bit, screaming like that. But the younger two, they're a little more mature. But, you remember those days? I'm going to live a little input into the Hammond household. One scream, and that's all they get. You know what I mean? You can put an end to that in a hurry. But they weren't putting an end to this thing. And she screamed, and so I'm trying to pay attention to whatever I was working on there. And then suddenly I realized the screaming had stopped. So I looked up, and the little girl is sitting there eating a slushie. Now, I don't know who that family was. I'd never seen them before. I probably will never see them again. But I know 2 things about that family. I can guarantee you 2 things about that family. One thing about that family is they're going to have to deal with that again because they rewarded it the first time. I'm sure it wasn't the first time. When you reward bad behavior, you get more bad behavior. All of you parents, you learned that really, really quickly, didn't you? All right? When you reward bad behavior, you get it. So this is going to keep happening. And here's another thing I learned, and this is what segues us here into this sermon this morning, is that this girl one day is going to have a rude awakening where she finds out that you don't throw food on the floor and stomp your feet and scream and always get what you want. Some of you graduated into adulthood and you realize this. Maybe when you were kids, you could scream and stomp your foot and your parents would give you what you wanted just to get you to shut up. But once you became an adult, you realize that's not how life really works. How many of you have ever had a situation in life that you really prefer it not to be the way that it was? Any of you? Some of you got the perfect life. I want to know how to do that. We've all been there, right? You've been there, you're like, I don't like this situation. I wish I could change it. I don't see any purpose in this. If God really loved me, something would be different. Because you hear that stuff on TV. If God really loves you, so he's always going to give you all this great stuff. And you know, everything's going to work out well for you. But then you open to the book of Genesis and you find Joseph. You find Joseph, who things didn't work out so well for him. You say, now, wait a minute, come on, I know the story of Joseph. I wouldn't mind it being Joseph because, yeah, I know Joseph was hated by his brothers. I know he was sold into slavery. I know that Joseph was lied about. I know he did all, but he became second in command in Egypt. I could put up with some of that stuff for a while to be second in command. But what we might not remember is that all the time that Joseph was going through those things, he did not know what the future was going to be like. He did not know that one day he was going to interpret a dream for Pharaoh and become second in command. He did not know that one day this was going to bring his family to Egypt, when eventually would allow the Israelites to come out with great riches hundreds of years later. He didn't know all that. All he knew is that life has given me bad turns. Every time I turn around, there's people that are standing up against me. Every time I turn around, somebody's lying about me, or something's not working. Someone's forgetting about me. I'm getting sold into slavery. All he knows is things aren't going well. But you know what he did in the middle of all this? He kept serving faithfully. He kept serving. He didn't sit down and have himself a pity party. Now, we don't know everything. He may have had a pity party for a while, but we're not told that. But he got over that, see? He got over that, and he said, you know, I'm going to keep serving, even though I don't know how this is going to turn out. Now, some of you might say, what is this Joseph guy? I don't know anything about Joseph. In case you don't know a whole lot about Joseph, you're not familiar with his story, let me give you a real quick recap of his life up to the point where we're going to pick up. Joseph had 11 brothers, and he was the favorite, or one of the favorites. Their father, Jacob, who God renamed Israel, that's where we get the children of Israel. His father, Jacob, had a favorite wife. How many of you have a favorite wife? I do. You guys got a favorite wife? How many of you have an unfavorite, least favorite wife? No, don't raise your hand, okay. How many of you have more than one? I got to check. There's some I don't know. Okay, I have a favorite wife. Only one, in case anyone's wondering. I only have one. I'm not even going to, things come into my mind, I'm not even going to go there. We're just going to push that stuff aside. But so Jacob had this favorite wife, Rachel, and Rachel had two sons. His two youngest sons were Joseph and Benjamin. And he loved Joseph and Benjamin so much that one of the things that Jacob did was he made this really nice coat. The Bible calls it a coat or a tunic of many colors. And he gave this to Joseph, and Joseph would wear this thing around, and all his brothers would be jealous. His older brothers, they'd be jealous because, you know, oh, daddy likes you better. You're the favorite child. You know, you got some of your siblings the favorite child. You know what I mean? Oh, you're the favorite child. And so they had this thing going on. And so one day Jacob sends Joseph out there to see his brothers that they're taking care of their sheep, and they say, you know, it's time to get rid of this guy, because one of the things that Joseph had done, it may not have been the smartest thing, but he told his brothers about these dreams that he'd had. He'd been having these dreams where they're out in the field and they're threshing their wheat and they're putting them into these stalks, you know, and Joseph in his dream sets up his stalk, and all his brothers had all theirs, and all his brothers' stalks would bow down to his. And then he had this dream about the sun and the moon and the stars all bow down to him. And he told his family these dreams, and his family's like, you know, the interpretation of that is that we're going to bow to you one day. And let me tell you, little pipsqueak, that's not happening. It's not, in the Hebrew, it doesn't say pipsqueak. I added that myself. But that's the idea, right? That, you know, we're not going to bow down. What's wrong with you? They hated this guy. Now, maybe he should have kept his mouth shut. You know, you guys are all going to bow down to me. I'm dreaming about this. And they hated him for it. And so Joseph goes out to find his brothers as they're taking care of the sheep, and they're like, you know, we can get rid of this guy once and for all. Daddy's favorite. He gets the nice coat, you know, the whole thing. And so we're going to get rid of this guy. And at first they thought maybe we should kill him. Well, maybe we shouldn't kill him. Not a good idea. Let's throw him in this well, and we decide what to do. There was a well out there, a pit that was empty of water, and they put him in there. Until here comes along a band of Ishmaelites. They're also referred to in the Bible as Midianites. Those groups often were looked at interchangeably. And they came by and they said, you know what, let's sell Joseph, our brother, to these guys. And then we'll take his coat and we'll dip it in some blood from a goat. And we'll tell Dad that we found this thing. And he'll think that Joseph died and we don't have to deal with Joseph anymore. Perfect plan. Man, this is going to work out good. So that's exactly what they did. And so now Joseph gets sold as a slave to these Ishmaelites. And that's where we pick up his story. But first, before we do that, Genesis 37, what would your attitude be if this happened? How many of you at some point wanted to sell your brother into slavery? Okay? No? That was the only... Come on, you guys are more spiritual than me. This isn't right. How many of your brothers want to sell you into slavery? How many of you wish you would have been sold to get out of your family? No, but, okay, I see one right there. So they like, let's get rid of this guy. Perfect plan. Okay, what would your attitude have been? Some of us would have been like, you know what? I've been serving God. I've been hearing about the God of my fathers. And look what he's done to me. He's selling me into slavery. I can't go back home to see my dad anymore. I'm away from my family, and they're going to take me who knows where. Many of us probably just would have said, okay, if that's what God does, I don't want him, because he's not doing what I think is good for me. So let's pick up and see how he responds. Genesis chapter 37, we're going to be skipping through chapters here just to kind of get the story. Genesis chapter 37 and verse 31. So they took Joseph's tunic, that's his coat, killed a kid of the goats, and dipped the tunic in the blood. And they sent the tunic of many colors, and they brought it to their father and said, we have found this. Do you know whether it's your son's tunic or not? And he recognized it and said, it is my son's tunic. A wild beast has devoured him. Without doubt, Joseph is torn to pieces. Then Jacob tore his clothes, put sackcloth on his waist, and mourned for his son many days. And all his sons and daughters arose to comfort him. Does that just grab you? Oh, Dad, I'm so sorry. We lost it. They know what happened. They know Joseph is alive, and they're comforting him. Bunch of hypocrites is what they are. But he refused to be comforted, and he said, for I shall go down into the grave to my son in mourning. Thus his father wept for him. Now the Midianites had sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and captain of the guard. So Joseph gets sold by his brothers, and he gets sold to Potiphar, someone who served Pharaoh, who was the king of Egypt. Well, then the next chapters here, they just pick up on things that are happening back in the home front there with Jacob. So we're going to skip up to chapter 39. We're going to pick up Joseph again. What happens to Joseph? Chapter 39 and verse 1, it says, now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him down there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he was a successful man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all he did prosper in his hand. So Joseph found favor in his sight and served him. Then he made him overseer of his house, and all that he had he put under his authority. So you might want to consider in your Bible, if you're reading the New King James like I am, so you have it set up this way, circle the word then. Because notice that Joseph was serving faithfully before he was put into the position of being master of the house underneath Potiphar. It's not like he's saying, oh, Potiphar has elevated me to this position now because I'm the boss and I'm going to serve. No, he was faithful when he was not the boss, when he was just the slave that had been purchased. He was faithful. Then his boss saw him and said, you know what, here is a man who was sold into slavery away from his family, and he is serving me faithfully. That's the kind of guy that I want. So there's some lessons in that too, isn't there? It might not be your perfect situation. You might not be the boss, but serve faithfully wherever you are. So Joseph is in a situation. He is a slave. He's sold to Potiphar, and he is faithful serving as a slave. You've heard the phrase before, when life hands you lemons, make lemonade, right? It's not from the Bible, but it's kind of that idea. You say, well, life's handing me lemons. You ever try sucking on a lemon? It's nasty. The only thing worse than that is grapefruit. I don't know why God made this stuff. He must have a reason. I tried grapefruit once as a kid. Like, why would you do this? This is like a torture device. Grapefruit? And then they make it into juice. You ever had grapefruit juice? Oh, man, that stuff is nasty. But that's a totally different point. Lemons. Yeah, lemon. But lemonade is great, man, because they put sugar in there. That's like God's gift to humanity is sugar, right? And you put it in and suddenly it tastes good. When life hands you something not good, make something good out of it. And that's what Joseph did. I don't like being here. I don't like being in Egypt. I don't like being a slave. I'd rather be at home with Daddy, eating a good food and wearing my nice coat. But, I'm not there. I'm here. So I'm going to serve right here. And I'm going to serve the best I can. I'm not going to try to sabotage Egypt. I'm not going to try to sabotage my new boss. I didn't sign up to work for him. He bought me. But you know what? I'm going to serve faithfully where I am. Look at verse 5 of chapter 39 now. Verse 5. So it was that from the time he had made him overseer of his house and all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake, and the blessing of the Lord was on all that he had on the house and in the field. Thus he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he did not know what he had except for the bread that he ate. So Potiphar, this Egyptian, he said, Joseph, you handle everything. He had faith in this guy. Now, this is a slave that he bought from another country, but Joseph had proven himself so much. He didn't go around bickering and complaining and trying to steal from his boss and, well, I'm a slave over here. I should be able to steal. He didn't. He was faithful in this deplorable situation. And his master saw that, and his master said, you know what, I'm going to elevate you to be in charge of everything that I have. And he didn't even know what all he had. You know, sometimes when we look at things, we think, what can I get out of it? We do that in the church too, right? What can I get out of the church rather than what can I put into it? And if you're not giving me what I want, I'm out here, I'm mad. Joseph was like, what am I going to get out of Egypt? Nothing. But you know, I'm going to serve. Why? Because it is the right thing to do. It's not about I like my situation, so I'm going to serve in it. It's about I've been put in this situation against my will, but no matter where I am going to serve God. Some of you might be in a situation like that today. You say, why would God allow this situation in my life? I don't like it very much. He didn't ask me. I didn't sign up for this. But you know what? Here I am, and I am going to serve faithfully. That's the lesson of Joseph that you need to have today. But there was a problem. Right now, everything seems to be going okay. I mean, okay if you don't mind being a slave. But for being a slave, he had it pretty good now, right? He came over there, he was a slave, and that was terrible, but then he got elevated. Now he's in charge of the master's house. He's been in Egypt for a while. So other than being a slave, things aren't too bad for Joseph right now. He'll have all the food he needs, and he's the boss. Even though he's a slave, he's a boss over everybody. Things are going okay. But as sometime happens, as God sometimes puts in our path, when things are going okay, he has this thing, I don't know if this is a spiritual term, but we can call it a monkey wrench. You know what I mean? I don't even know where that term came from, but I know what it means. Everything's going fine, and suddenly everything is like upside down. Everything is turned over, and it's terrible. And that's what happens to Joseph. Okay, finishing up verse 6 here, the last half. It says, now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. See, that's the problem. Guys, don't you hate that? Isn't that just so hard? You're handsome in form and appearance, and it's hard, right? It's hard. Some of you wives are like, don't agree, because anyway. So he's handsome. He's a good-looking guy. But this is a problem because his boss has a wife who has no character. Okay? So she's going to come on to him. And look at this. We have to read this because this shows so much, and we're actually going to talk more about this in a couple of weeks when we talk about how to stay away from sin. Run sometime. We'll talk about that more later, but let me just read this right now. Verse 7. And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast longing eyes on Joseph, and she said, lie with me. But he refused and said to his master's wife, look, my master doesn't know what's with me in the house, and he's committed all that he has to my hand. There is no one greater in this house than I, nor has he kept back anything from me but you, because you're his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? So it was as she spoke to Joseph day to day that he did not heed her to lie with her or to be with her. But it happened about this time when Joseph went into the house to do his work that none of the men of the house was inside. So that she caught him by his garment, saying, lie with me. But he left his garment in her hand and fled and ran outside. And so it was when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and fled outside that she called to the men of the house and spoke to them, saying, see, he's brought into us a Hebrew to mock us. And he came in to me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. And it happened when he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried out that he left his garment with me, and he fled and went outside. So she kept his garment with her until her master came home. Boy, she's a conniving little fool. Then she spoke with him to him with words like these, saying, the Hebrew servant whom you brought to us came in to mock me. So it happened as I lifted up my voice and cried out that he left his garment with me and fled outside. So it was when his master heard the words which his wife spoke to him, saying, your servant did this to me after this manner, that his anger was aroused. Then Joseph's master took him and put him into a prison, a place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in the prison. And I wrote in my Bible, again. This is prison number 2. He gets sold as a slave. He's over there, and he's put in prison. And he's there. Well, I don't know if he was a prisoner before that, but he was bought, and he was put in prison. And there he is. He's sitting there, and what does he do? You know what I would do? Probably, if I wasn't acting right. Okay, God, I gave you one shot at this thing, man. You know what? I was serving you faithfully when things were not easy, when things were hard, when things were difficult. I was serving you faithfully. And look what you did to me. Have you ever had a prayer like that? Look what you did to me, God. The problem is we don't understand what God is doing. We're just looking at our circumstances around us. And he's there in this prison. What's he going to do now? I mean, he gave God a chance. I was a slave. I was in prison. Or I was a slave. I was, working for Potiphar there. And God, I gave you that. Now look where it got me. Serving God doesn't really pay off. That's what Joseph could have been thinking. Well, how does he act? How does he act? Genesis chapter 39, verse 21. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy, and he gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever they did there, it was his doing. The keeper of the prison did not look at anything that was under Joseph's authority because the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made it to prosper. So how did Joseph act? He's like, I don't like being in prison, but I'm in prison, and I didn't do anything to deserve this, so you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to keep serving, even though I don't like my situation, even though it's not what I want to be, even though it's not the place I want to be at home with my dad wearing my nice coat. But no, I'm here. I'm in prison, and God didn't come through for me. But you know what? I'm still going to serve him. Now, I think about this as the prisoner, the jailer is walking around. It says that he picked up Joseph, who was a prisoner, and he said, here's a man that I can trust to be in charge of the other prisoners. What do you think it was about Joseph that made the jailer say, here's a guy that I can trust? I'll bet it wasn't this. I bet Joseph wasn't sitting there complaining and bickering all the time. I bet Joseph wasn't trying to break away. I bet he wasn't planning some plot to overthrow Pharaoh. He was doing whatever he could faithfully, and the jailer looked at him and said, you know what? Here's a man, he's probably in chains. I mean, he's a predator now, right? And he's not just a slave from that land of Canaan. They took him from some, place way out in the country. Nobody knows who he is. Now he's a predator because his rap sheet says that he was coming after his boss's wife. But he's still, amidst all that, he's still serving the best that he possibly can. And I just want to give you this. Start writing some things on your outline. This isn't from the Bible, but I think it's good. It's good advice. If you can't change it, embrace it. If you can't change it, embrace it. You probably got situations in your life that you don't like and you can't change. We all do, right? What do? We want to sit around and complain. We want to walk out on God. We want to walk out on your marriage. You want to walk out on your church. You want to walk out on your friends or your job. Sometime you just say, you know what? I can't change this, but here I am. So guess what? I'm going to embrace it. I'm going to do whatever I can in this situation. That's just simply good old common wisdom. If you can't change it, just keep working at it. Just embrace it. That's exactly what Joseph did. So Joseph had been sold. He'd been lied about. He's in prison. There's two other guys in prison at least. These two were Pharaoh, the king's butler, and his baker. Now, what were the butler and baker doing in prison together? We're not told, but we assume there's some kind of an attempted poisoning of the king. That seems what it seems to be like here, okay? And they're both in prison, and so they just so I don't have to read the whole story there, what happens is they both they have a dream. Was it they who had a dream? Who had a dream? I'm mixing it up. But anyway, so there's this dream, okay? And they both, the butler and baker, they had a dream. And the butler, I get the guys mixed up. Which one? One of them gets to live and one's going to die. The baker is going to be executed. The butler is going to be returned to his position. That's how it's going to work out. So they have these dreams, and Joseph interprets these dreams for them, and then it happens. So the baker gets executed. Apparently he's the one who causes plot, or so they thought anyway. The butler goes back to his position. Look at chapter 40, verse 23. Genesis chapter 40, verse 23. Joseph said, hey, when you go up there, go back to the king. Tell him I'm in prison for nothing I did wrong. See if you can go to bat for me. Verse 23, yet the chief butler did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. So Joseph was a slave, hated by his brothers, sold into slavery because they were jealous. He was bought by this guy, lied about by the guy's wife, thrown into prison. And now he's forgotten about. I mean, it's like everything that can go wrong. Joseph's got it, man. It's like nothing's going right for this guy. Now he's sitting there, and it tells us for 2 years he sat in prison, thinking, surely the butler will remember to go and tell, oh, king, there's a guy who was unjustly put in prison, and he interpreted my dream for me. It's something, you ought to go check him out. But he forgot. So Joseph is sitting there in prison for 2 years, waiting and waiting. No, the knock on the door never comes. Joseph, why don't you come stand before the king? Nothing. He's just there, but he's serving. He's serving faithfully. A couple years later, the king has a dream, Pharaoh. He has this really crazy dream. If you remember something about there were these the big fat cows that come up out of the river, and some thin cows ate them up. You know, how many of you guys have weird dreams? I have weird dreams. My wife's like, I wish I could interpret your dreams. I don't think I want to know. I don't think I want to know what they mean. But dreams where God was sending information to people because of their dreams, or through their dreams. And so Pharaoh's like, somebody tell me what this dream means. And everyone's like, oh, we can't figure it out. And suddenly the butler's like, I remember now. When I was in prison, there was this guy down there that told me what was going to happen. He told me and the baker, and what he said was going to happen happened. You ought to go ask him. So they're like, hey, Joseph, come out of the prison. He shaves. I think it says in somewhere he took a knife and shaved himself. Well, aren't you thankful for nice razors, right? But he shaved himself, and he goes stand before the king, and he interpreted the dream. And here's the interpretation of the dream. God is going to send 7 years of plenty on Egypt, and then 7 years of famine. So what you need to do, king, is you need to find somebody who can be in charge of storing up things during the 7 years of plenty. And so when we have the 7 years of famine, that there's plenty of food. And the king's like, you got the job, man. So now Joseph suddenly, just like that, he's gone from being hated by his brothers and jealousy and sold into slavery and lied about and forgotten about and sitting in prison. All of a sudden, he's second in command in Egypt. How did that happen? It didn't happen because Joseph got upset about everything that didn't go his way. That's not why it happened. It happened because he's like, this situation, I don't know. He every step of the way, he probably expected to be there the rest of his life. I'm going to be serving Potiphar for the rest of my life. If that's what it is, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be in prison the rest of my life. If that's what it is, I'm going to serve here. Whatever it is, he was just faithful in that. And now he finds himself second in command. Go all the way to Genesis chapter 50 now, toward the end of the book here. Genesis chapter 50. I know we're skipping a lot of good stuff, but you guys are going to want lunch at some point today. Genesis chapter 50, verse 15. It says, so this, I know I got to skip a lot, but eventually Joseph's brothers come to buy some of this grain, right? Because the famine is everywhere, and his brothers come, not knowing it's Joseph. They're going to show up to him. We're going to talk more about them a little bit next week. And they show up and they say, hey, we need some grain. So he plays around with them a little bit, the whole thing. And they realize it's Joseph. Now they're a little bit afraid because, wait, we sold Joseph into slavery. I'm not quite sure how he got to be second in command, but he's got power now. It wouldn't take much for him just to say, off with all their heads. So his brothers are a little bit afraid. But Joseph does not act with revenge toward his brothers. Genesis chapter 50, verse 15. When Joseph's brothers saw their father was dead, this is all the way a lot farther. His family had come to Egypt. They're staying there. Jacob died, and now his brothers are like, wait a minute, I wonder if Joseph was only being nice to us because Dad's still alive. He might kill us now. What is his response? When Joseph's brothers saw their father was dead, they said, perhaps Joseph will hate us and may actually repay us for the evil we did to him. So they sent messengers to Joseph saying, before your father died, he commanded, saying, thus you shall say to Joseph, I beg you, please forgive the trespasses of your brothers and their sin, for they did evil to you. Now please forgive the trespass of the servants of the God of your father. And Joseph wept when they spoke to him. I've always wondered if Jacob really gave him that or if they were lying. It doesn't really make a difference, but I wondered if Jacob really said that. Then his brothers also went and fell down before his face, and they said, behold, we are your servants. And Joseph said to them, do not be afraid, for am I in the place of God? Joseph could have been, you know what? You're right, I only kept you guys alive because of Daddy. Now that Daddy's gone, I'm going to get rid of you all, your family. I don't want anything to do with you because you sold me into slavery all those years ago. He could have done that, but he's like, no, you guys, there's something that you don't understand about this. And here's what you don't understand about it. What you don't understand is that there is a lot about life that we don't understand. Am I in the place of God? God allowed this to happen. God even orchestrated this to happen. Why would I be mad at you for playing a part in this thing? You say, well, his brothers were wrong. Yes, they were wrong. But Joseph forgave them. That's all next week. We're going to talk next week about how to respond to the people that God uses in this, because that's hard when you got to deal with wicked people, right? But today we're looking at the situation here. Joseph says, look, am I in the place of God? So a few things that I think will help us here as we understand a little bit about the life of Joseph. A few things to understand. Number one, believe that God has a plan for the big picture. This will help you immensely as you go through your life. If you just understand that there is this big picture that God has, and we don't have a clue what the big picture is often. Now, if you read the Bible, you get an idea. You kind of know how it's all going to work out generally, but your place in it, you don't know. Why did God allow this situation? It's not like God can't make the millennium and tribulation all happen at some point. You know, if this situation hasn't happened to me, why me? Why this one? I don't want to be here. Why am I here? What's going on? Joseph understood, look, there is a big picture. Have you ever seen a mosaic? You know what a mosaic is? Got all these little tiles, and each little tile doesn't mean anything until you put them all together. And then, wow, that's a nice picture. But if you get up close, you see the little ones, they don't make any sense. Our lives are like a little piece of the mosaic. Sometimes as you go through life, that picture gets bigger and bigger, and some things start to make a little bit more sense. But even when you die, you might not be able to see the whole picture. Joseph, as he's going through life, he's in prison. He's looking at that little tile there in the mosaic of his life, and he's looking at that and he's saying, I don't understand how this fits into anything. I don't know how it fits into my life. I don't know how it fits into my family's life. He didn't understand. And even Joseph gets to the end of his life, and he still couldn't see the whole thing. He just knew that as I'm working in this little mosaic, this little tile, this little piece of life, I don't know what's going on, but I know that there's a big picture that I can't see. So I'm just going to have to trust in this little situation I'm in. Now, you guys probably haven't been sold into slavery. You probably haven't been in prison in Egypt. Most of you, some of you maybe. But this doesn't happen. But you say, you know, I've got different things in my life that are similar. Because I've got this diagnosis from the doctor. I've got this family member that I can't get along with very well. I've got a job that I can't leave it, but it's driving me crazy. I've got children that are acting this way. I got from starvation. If Joseph would not have been there, interpreting the dream, storing all this stuff up, doing that with wisdom, his family would have starved in the famine. Joseph is thinking, I figured this out. At the end of my life here, I know why God had worked it out. But there was so much more of the plan that Joseph didn't even know then. Joseph, his eyes expanded, that mosaic, he gets to see a section of it. He says, now it makes sense. But what he didn't know is there's a huger picture. I don't know if huger is a word, but it is today. There's this huge picture that God is looking at, and he didn't understand. What Joseph probably didn't understand in his day, that this whole life of Joseph, it did not just affect his family, it affected forever. Because Jacob was able to come with his family to Egypt. And as they lived in Egypt for a few hundred years, they grew and they blossomed and they grew and they grew. And when they came out and after the 10 plagues and, crossing of the Red Sea and all that, all of their descendants, many, many of them, they were able to come out with riches they took from Egypt when Egypt said, get out of here after the Passover. Remember that situation? And they left with riches. They could not have grown and become rich like that if they would have stayed out in the land of Canaan. They had to come over there. Egypt was like an incubator for Israel. And they went out, and that became a great nation. As they gone out, they could see God open the Red Sea and work miracles, and they could see the glory of God that they would follow. None of that could have happened if Joseph hadn't been sold into slavery by his brothers. But Joseph didn't know all that. He thought, I got it. God was saving my family from starvation. But no, God was actually eventually saving the world from hell, because through that, his descendants, Jesus would come. All that had to happen because Joseph was sold into slavery. He didn't know all that. And I say all that to say this. Sometimes you think, I'm starting to get a picture why God is doing this in my life, but you might not even have a clue. You might not have the first clue how much things are going to branch out and out more. And if we could just understand that God has this big picture, we might just be able to chill a little bit. Because I don't understand what's going on. I don't know everything that's going around me. But here's the thing, we need to be faithful. Loyalty. We prove our loyalty to God in times of difficulty. Joseph could have sat in prison and said, you know what, I've got this God, Elohim, Jehovah, whatever he would have called him. I've got this God, and I serve him. But he had to prove it to his fellow prisoners. He had to prove it to those people in Egypt by actually serving. He was loyal to God in times of difficulty. Let's just say that you worked for me. I was your employer, and you worked in my office. And one day I come to you and I said, okay, I have a job for you. I want you to go down to the break room. There's a lot of pizza in there. I want you to go down there and eat some pizza and just take a couple hours and have a break. And you go down there and do that. Am I going to go and pick up my phone to my business buddies and say, hey, I'm just going to tell you how loyal my employees are, man. I told them to go on the break room and they all went. They're so loyal to me. I mean, would your employees do that if you told them he had pizza and ice cream down there? No, they're going to say, they aren't doing it because they're loyal to you, man. They're doing it because they want pizza, right? That's not loyalty. But what if I were to say, look, guys, I need you to come in Saturday morning. Got a big project to work on here. I can't pay anymore. Can you come up? And they say, you know what, we'll do it because we love you. That's loyalty. You see the difference there? Joseph was loyal to God because his situation wasn't great, and he still served. If God had come and said, Joseph, you deal with this for a while, and I'm going to make you second in command. And so, okay, that's good, God. He would have been doing it for himself. But he served when he did not know what the future was going to be. He couldn't see the big picture. He proved his loyalty to God in that difficult situation. And he told his brothers, look, you guys meant what you did for evil, but God meant it for good. Are you going to kill us, Joseph? Am I in God's place? Who set this thing up? It wasn't me. I just understand that God has this big picture. So that's the intellectual part of this thing. The intellectual part is understand that God has a big picture, that God knows. We all know that, right? We know if I were to give you a test, one question on the test, does God have greater wisdom than you? Does he have a big picture? We're all going to say yes. The next part of it is, how does that play out in our lives? Practically. Number 2, live what you believe about God. You see how simple this is? Do you believe that God has this big picture? Do you believe that he's sovereign? Do you believe that he can do whatever he wants to do? Do you believe that? Okay, live like that. Well, how does free will of man enter in? That's a totally different, interesting question. God is powerful enough to use our free will to accomplish his terms. And that's really incredible. Live what you believe about God. Live what you believe about God. We all know that God has a plan. How does that act out in our life? We have this thing that we call theology, right? I love to study theology. Theology is a study of God. As I was working on this, I thought, what about, how do we change theology to actology? I thought, anyone ever come up with that word, actology? Or did I make that one up? Some philosophers use it in some, obscure area, but I couldn't find the dictionary, so it's my word, right? Theology to actology. Theology is what we know. Actology is what do we actually do about what we believe? Oh, I know that God is in control. I know that God has a plan. I know that God can work things out. But you know what? He doesn't know what happened to me, and my situation isn't right. Well, wait a minute here. Your theology isn't helping you out. Do you really believe that God is powerful? Do you really believe that God is omniscient and loving and omnipotent? Do you really believe all that? If you really believe it, act like it. You're in circumstances you don't like. Stop whining and griping and complaining and just serve, because if he didn't want you in that situation, he can move you out of it. That's what your theology says. He's powerful enough to do that. But he might have you in that prison in Egypt. He might have you being lied about by somebody. He might have you in a family where everybody hates you, like Joseph. He might have you in one of those situations, but you just got to say, you know what? I don't see the big picture, but I'm going to serve him anyway in it. A few things here quickly about how to help you out. How to help. Resist the urge to complain. I mean, this is really simple, right? Resist the urge to complain. We like to complain. Well, what good does complaining do? I mean, really. What good does complaining do? What does it change? You can even go and complain to a person in charge of something. And they're probably, some of you who are in positions of leadership, someone complains to you, that's different than somebody coming with a true concern. You know what I'm talking about, right? It's not that you're not caring, but complaining, people complain all the time, I don't care. A true concern and maybe a way to help fix it, that's a different thing. What does complaining do? Complaining just shows everybody that you're a complainer. He doesn't do anything, right? So when you're in these situations, God has put me in this situation, and I don't like it, just resist the urge to complain. Just stop complaining. That's number one. Stop complaining. Number two, again, this is simple. Be faithful wherever you are. Wherever you are. Joseph preferred to be at home, but he wasn't. And he couldn't just go home. So he says, I am going to serve God where I am. I'm going to be faithful wherever I am. Remember, if you can't change it, embrace it. I don't want to be in prison in Egypt. I don't want to be in Egypt at all. But I'm here, and I can't change it. So I am just going to be faithful. And then the third one, we're not going to take much time on this because this is next week. Forgive those who contribute to the big picture. You say, all my problems come because of somebody else. Okay. You can't change that somebody else. Maybe there's some forgiveness that needs to happen. We'll look a lot more at that next week. So if we could back out and see the whole picture, we would see things differently about our lives. You all probably heard the illustration of the quilt, right? Some of our quilting ladies would know. If you quilt or sew anything, an embroidery of some kind, you turn it over, you look at the back side, you say, man, that looks terrible. But we don't always see is the other side. When I was a kid, my mom she would do a lot of sewing. She would sew clothes for us, and she would do alterations and things. So a lot of times what we do is, we were kids, she would have us stand on a chair, and she put all these little pins in our pants. Like you need a hem, or I'm working on this. And you know how dangerous it is for your mom to be putting pins in your pants? Like, Mom, that's like really close, don't hurt me. So we're standing, we're really, really still. And she got all these pins around in there, don't move. He's going to hurt you. And so we're standing on this chair, and she's putting all those in. We're trying not to get stabbed by the pins. Sometimes life is like that. We're standing there, we're trying not to get stabbed, right? I feel like if I move, something bad is going to happen. I don't like to be in this position. Sometimes life is like that. But what we don't see is that mess. If I look down, it's a mess. There's pins all over, and it might hurt me. But that is the process of making something better. Eventually, Mom's going to pull all those pins out of there. When she's all done, you're going to be like, wow, look what she did. I have no idea how you can sew. It's beyond me. I don't know how that stuff works. How did that happen? But see, sometimes you're in that situation, and you almost feel like one of those little dolls that put the pins in, You're like, God, why is this stuff happening to me? Because it's not going well, and this is hurting, this is pricking me, I don't like it. I just want to, God, I could just serve you so much better if I had a different situation in life. How about what Joseph said? You know what? In this situation, I am just going to serve. Now, the lesson of Joseph's life is not serve God and he'll make you second in command. It's not serve God and he'll bless you. That's not what the lesson is. The lesson is serve God even if he never blesses you. Even if you never see on this earth. Some people serve God and they're faithful, and then they die. Sometimes they're martyred. They don't know how the whole story fit in there. They don't know. They never know on this earth how it fit into God's overall plan. But they just served faithfully anyway. I want to ask you to bow your heads and close your eyes with me. Just have a little reflection time right here. Some of you might say, you know what, I know exactly what you're talking about because I am there today. I'm in a situation that I don't like. I had the word from the doctor. I have a family member that's just causing me issues, a family member that's wayward. I have a job situation I don't know what to do with it. I have a neighborhood situation I don't know what to do with. I've got something in my life. I wish it wasn't this way. And I don't know what to do. Don't try to, well, if you can change it, that's fine. But if you can't change it, just embrace it. And say, you know what, I'm going to be like Joseph. I am going to serve God because I understand that he's got this plan that's so much bigger than anything that I understand. I don't have a clue what he's doing. But I know he's doing something. You might just need to today come here to the front or stand there at your seat, whatever, and tell God, I don't know why you've allowed me to be in this situation, but I am going to serve you while I'm here. I don't know. Maybe one day I'll have the answer, maybe I won't, but it doesn't matter because it's not about me. What you want me to do is to be faithful. That's what I'm going to do. Father, we ask today for some folks that might be in here today that are struggling with things like this. They might feel like they're in prison in Egypt, lied about, hated, whatever. I ask that they would make that decision today. I am just going to serve God in this situation where I am because I can't change it. I ask that this be an encouragement for them. Help them to see that you have a bigger picture, even if you never show them what it is, but that you have one. Speak to hearts as is needed today in Jesus' name. Amen. Let's stand.